Hi, awesome members of the Nest. Thank you for joining us. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be here with us. And tonight we're talking to Neely Tubati Alexander, the author of Love Buzz. How's it going? Well, how's it going?
It's good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, thanks for being here. So excited to chat about this very cute rom-com.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for those of us who aren't familiar with you or Love Buzz, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm based in Arizona, and I grew up in the Seattle area where this book is set. And Love Buzz is my debut novel. It came out from Harper Perennial earlier. I was going to say earlier this month, but now it's June, so it came out in May. So it's actually officially a month today. And it is the story of Serena Khan, who is at a bachelorette party during Mardi Gras for her estranged cousin and not really enjoying herself. And on the last night of the trip, she meets a guy and they have this instant connection type of encounter, and it gets cut short rather abruptly. And she goes back home to Seattle and is still sort of thinking about this guy and decides she's going to find him based on the short list of clues she knows from their brief interaction. So in turn, she sort of upends her life and blows it all up and makes a series of life changes. So it is on its head a rom-com. Really, it's a women's fiction story. The romance is secondary to sort of all of the life changes that she makes throughout this journey, but the romance is sort of the catalyst for that.
Love it. Yeah, I really related to a lot of the things that Serena's going through of like not being okay. So we try to be spoiler free in our chats. Would you say that the things we learn about Serena when she gets back to Seattle is a spoiler?
If you're paying attention, no, but I suppose it is. I mean, we took it out of copy and things like that, right? Because it is, I guess it is. I mean, can 50 pages in be a spoiler? I guess it can be. So yes, I guess I'd say it is. I don't know. I'm the type of person who doesn't like to know anything about a book, so okay. I would consider it a spoiler. I don't even read cover for the most part or jackets for the most part. I like to just go in blind. So to me, it would be, but I think probably for most people it wouldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, Jenny and I were talking about how different people have different triggers, wanting content warnings and stuff. And so she was talking about how one of our friends has a specific trigger, which could relate to this book, kind of.
Okay.
And we're like, I mean, is it a spoiler? Well, anyway. But so
I'm going to ask you after because now I'm interested.
Yeah. But yeah, relating to being unhappy with your love life, unhappy with your job, unhappy with just
turning
all
30
of it and being on the precipice of 30 and like what you want your life to be is kind of what I related to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think, turning 30, I just turned 40 this past year. And so I'm 41 now. I've made it sound like I'm 40, but that birthday felt very different than 30. 30 to me was very sort of chaotic and, felt like I wasn't as far along as I was hoping I would be and kind of not in the place. And you think of it as old, but it really is not at all. And you sort of view like, okay, I've been out of college for X number of years. I should have things figured out. And you oftentimes don't. And so it very much was similar to what I felt when I turned 30 in terms of just not feeling like you're as far as along or as put together as you would hope that you are. And then, future birthdays have felt very different. And I've heard other women say this too, but when you turn 40, when you turn 50, these are the ages that you start to then feel more in your own skin and content and happy and, not really caring what anyone else thinks, but it takes to that point for whatever reason to start to feel that way for a lot of us. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on your Instagram, you feature a lot of your family and a lot of books. Do you have a favorite family memory from the past year?
Favorite family memory?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Favorite family memory. We did Disney for the first time. I have 2 small kids. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I was not excited for that. I'm not a Disney type of person at all. So I was expecting kind of pure misery through the whole thing, but it pretty cool, to see their, like, it is a whole thing about joy on their faces and,
Mhm.
getting to experience things with them for the first time. So that was really cool. And better than I sort of anticipated that it was going to be.
Did you do land or world?
We did land.
That's also the only one that I've been to.
Yeah, it was much more tolerable than expected.
Yeah. It's also smaller than Disney World.
Mhm.
Yes.
Disney World is a lot.
It felt manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are there even, I know they have Star Wars stuff now at the Disneyland. Are there other like separate parks that you can
So we
go
did a
to?
like park hopper where you do California Adventure and Disney.
Okay.
And the Star Wars rides were amazing.
Mhm.
Amazing. That was really cool. I'm not even a Star Wars fan, but they were amazing. And then California Adventure had some really fun stuff too. So
Yeah, I was like, I feel like when I went there when I was 11, so many years ago.
changed a little bit.
Yeah, I think they just had California Adventure from what I recall.
Yeah. I think
That's
the last time I
fun.
went to Disneyland was probably about, 8, 9 or something. But Disney
Yeah.
World, I went for my 25th birthday. So,
Oh.
was like, I wanted something big for my 25th. And then did absolutely nothing for my 30th. So,
That can happen.
Yeah.
Neely, do your kids have favorite like characters or movies that they were excited to see?
So my daughter's always been, she's the 5-year-old. She's always been super into the villains. So like even as like a 1-year-old, it was Ursula, not Ariel. And it was right. So if you've seen the new Trolls movies, it's Barb is like the rock. She loves all of the villains, which the villains are not the ones that they don't ever have the villains walking around at the parks.
No, they don't.
They only do it during Halloween. So she was kind of bummed that none of her favorite characters were out. But yeah, they were just, they don't walk around like they used to. That's the one thing I remember from being a kid, where they were always kind of around and you would run into them. Whereas now you have to stand in line and you have scheduled times to see them. So that was kind of a bummer, but no, they were mostly, she was disappointed there weren't any villains. My son was just happy to be there.
my niece is very into the villains as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we had one day where we wore all villain shirts. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's cute.
Yeah. My niece wanted Maleficent last year for
Nice.
Halloween. So
Nice.
Maleficent is the best. I mean, you would think with the popularity of like the Descendants and stuff like that they
Yeah.
would have more villains around, but
Yeah. I guess it takes away from the happy vibe to have villains.
yes. So kind of along those lines, but not. So we know you are wow. One of our friends in the chat has already given me some crap about my questions. Sorry, it's been a long week. So we know you're a reality TV fan. So what kind of shows are we talking here? Like,
oh my gosh,
dating or all the above, or
I'm deep into the scandal of it all right now with
God.
Vanderpump. We could spend 3 hours just talking about that right now and I would be completely happy. So I'm down the TikTok rabbit hole of,
I mean, have
is
you
the reveal going to be on like the third part 3 of the reunion? So I've watched that show since the beginning. So I feel like I'm very, very invested in this storyline. Go ahead. You were going to say something about I want to hear your thoughts on the.
Well, I was going to say, so last night, long story short, had gotten, when I lived with my best friend during the pandemic, I got her to watch Vanderpump because she was opposed to it before that. And it was, the pandemic. So it was like, we were stuck together. She got really invested in it. And I was like, good. And so last night we virtually watched part 2 of the reunion together, which is what we do sometimes when we can't get together. And I feel like part 2 was just like crap and it should have just been 2 parts. I don't know. I feel like we didn't learn that much last night. And once again, it left us with, or Wednesday night, whatever, left us with Raquel still not even coming out. And it was like, really?
Yeah, it was a little anticlimactic this last one, but I'm really interested in what happens in part 3.
Yeah. And then just like, have you, obviously, if you said you were on the TikTok stuff, like them saying that there's going to be some kind of reveal next week, and like, what could it even be? I've seen everything from like it's barely a reveal to it's going to be like a spin-off in Vegas, or it's going to, or it could be like Raquel or James saying that like James really did like punch her in the nose years ago. Like,
I've heard so many theories, and I feel like they all could be accurate. So yeah, I'm very interested to see what it is.
Jennie, are you just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't watch much reality TV. I'll like wait years and then go back and binge it. But
that's the way to do it, though, because then you don't have to wait for new episodes.
True.
And you're not going to get spoilers of, you know, if you don't watch it the same day it comes out, which is super annoying to have to do too. So yeah, I feel like you've figured out the way to do it. I don't have enough control to wait, but
no, I like need to get my fix right away.
What are your favorites, Ashley?
I mean, I'm a Bravo
same.
fan at heart, but I am also, you know, like a Bachelor fan, Married at First Sight, whatever, like Netflix has taken up, Love is Blind. I need to start the new queer version of The Ultimatum that's on right now.
Yeah, I need to watch that one too. Okay, we have the same tastes.
Started out as a big Real Housewives fan, still a fan, but expanded my taste a little bit. But yes, I could talk about Scandal forever, especially that he's like out there like touring with his band this whole time right now, and I'm like, who's paying to go see him? And I've always like been like a back and forth fan of Sandoval, but like now he's just
that's more generous than me of being a fan of his. I've never been a fan of his, but this is a 10-year reckoning now happening.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. But yeah, I was just earlier today watching, I realized I didn't finish the last season of Real Housewives of Orange County, and that's starting again, so I had to do a little watching as I worked.
And the main cast is coming back, I think, too, which is exciting.
I think so, yeah.
For the original, like Tamra, and so I'll spare you, Jennie. I'll stop talking about this, but so my book 3, which I'm drafting now because you know publishing is slow, is I'm calling it like it's a legally blonde meets the jury. If you know, but it's basically a Real Housewife type of character, like a reality star who's accused of murdering her husband, and so she's on like a Real Housewives type of show. This is how deep my love of reality TV goes.
Yes, I love it.
Sign me up for that one.
Are there any archetypes of housewives that you are really pulling in there?
There will be a lot of Easter eggs for reality fans. Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite city?
Oh gosh. I love OC, but I think once some of the original cast went away, it wasn't as good. And then I like Beverly Hills a lot too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Lisa Vanderpump of it all.
Yeah, it's not the same without her, but
no. And then there's like talk of like, would she come back? And it's like, I mean, her and Kyle like aren't friends anymore, so probably not if Kyle's there. I don't know.
I don't think she's friends with really anyone anymore on that cast, so it would be interesting.
That's always fun. All right, well, Jennie, we'll go.
We'll pivot towards the book, right? Yeah. Who was your loudest cheerleader when you were writing Love Buzz?
Oh gosh. You know, it's funny. So this is my debut novel. So I really didn't tell a lot of people that I was writing because I wanted to see if I was going to get the agent and get the deal. I didn't want to be the person who sort of for 20 years talked about writing a book and then just sort of never had anything come to fruition. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was very sort of just closed to I'll announce it when I have sort of all of these things. So my husband was one of the only people that knew. He was super supportive of me. And then once I got my agent, she obviously worked with me a lot and through the editorial process as we went on submission. So they were really the only two people that were significantly involved during the drafting stage of the book. So yeah, my husband for sure.
How do your kids feel about it?
Well, again, they're 8 and 5. So my 5-year-old really loves that her name is in the book. So she gets excited about that. And she's a very fun, like little cheerleader, anytime she sees, that it's posted somewhere or like in a store, that's really cool for her to see. And then my son, who's 8, doesn't really care. Yeah. He's like, all right, that's cool. And then, Mo Willems would be much cooler, which I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't beat him.
Can't beat him.
So did you do anything fun for the release of Love Buzz now a month ago?
Yeah. So the book came out May 2nd, which was a Tuesday. So my husband took the day off and we went around to the local bookstores and saw it on the shelves for the first time, which was really cool. And then the next day I flew to Seattle and we started the little Love Buzz tour. So we went to Seattle, had a couple stops there, came home, had an event here, went to LA, San Diego. So there was 2 weeks of kind of traveling and getting to meet booksellers and readers, which was really fun. So yeah, it was a 2-week-long party.
That's really fun.
Yeah, it was very fun.
Sounds a bit like Mardi Gras.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we finally are now just hearing more about the book tours starting again and stuff like that.
Yeah, and as a debut, you don't know what to expect. It's certainly not expected that a debut is going to go on tour. No one really knows who you are. No one really, especially the first 2 weeks of your book has come out, people haven't really even had a chance to read it yet. So it was a pleasant surprise that they were wanting to send me out. So yeah, I'm grateful for that for sure.
That's awesome.
Did you find any new favorite bookstores along the way?
Ooh, so the very first stop I had was on Bainbridge Island in Washington. So it's like a 15-minute ferry ride from Seattle, and you can see the Seattle skyline from the island. There's a store called Eagle Harbor Books, and it's just on their quaint little main street. It's a super cute store. They have great restaurants there. The weather was nice, and it's owned by a brother and sister. And he was telling me that Bainbridge Island per capita has the most amount of authors of any other location in the US, which makes sense because it's a beautiful setting. You're close to the city. You're not so remote that you can't get places, but it still is like, it feels very quiet and remote. And you can have beautiful views of the water, of the sound. So I was like, okay, great. Well, now that's on my list of places I want to be able to write at some point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that store was really cool.
That sounds amazing. And you grew up in Seattle or in Washington in general?
Yeah, in like suburbs of Seattle.
Very cool. I've made it to Portland and that's as far, but going up to Seattle is definitely on my list for sure.
Yeah, well, tell me when you do. I'll have a lot of recommendations.
I will take you up on that.
Seattle in summer is really beautiful. It's a really cool, fun place to be in this time.
Yep. I lived in Southern Washington for 3 months at college. So,
okay.
Yep. Long Beach.
Okay.
So, yeah. It was very different from Atlanta. So,
yeah.
Very different. Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun.
So you told us a little bit about the plot of Love Buzz. Can you share a little bit about what inspired it?
Yeah, I started writing this during COVID, as we were talking about, and I was really more and more kind of escaping into escapist types of reads, right? Wanted like light, fun, anywhere but here types of stories. I just couldn't bring myself to read books that were too heavy. the world already felt so heavy. I didn't want to read books that were heavy. And so I really just wanted to write the type of book that I was looking for and that I wanted to read, which was like a fun kind of beach read, escapist type of book. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of the specific plot, as you mentioned, I'm, a huge fan of the movie Serendipity. And that was a movie from my childhood that kind of always stuck with me for whatever reason. And so I kind of thought about what is a modern take on this movie and what would that look like. So yeah, it was really kind of a nod to that and to, like you said, 2000 rom-coms in general. And kind of going back to that space where it's a little bit kind of quirky and like a little bit weirder, I think, than, some of the rom-coms today, which hopefully resonates with people. But yeah, I kind of liked the idea of going back to that specific space.
No, like as soon as I opened up the book and saw it starts with a quote from Serendipity, I was like, oh wait, this is gonna be a great book.
Yeah. Find me another book that quotes Jeremy Piven in the epigraph.
Yes. And I definitely saw like the modern, like the threads of thinking about the movie Serendipity and then being like, okay, but how would it happen now when there is the internet, but still you don't have a lot of information about this person?
Yeah, which the internet is a hard thing to tackle when you're talking about trying to find somebody, right? Because it is everyone is so accessible and available. So yeah, that definitely required a workaround for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like I've talked to a lot of authors who it's like they will try to shy away from like phones and like things like and technology in their book. But I feel like obviously it was necessary in this book to have that and have the different ways that someone could go about trying to find someone, and either from finding an event that she thought he might be at to just going to walk around his neighborhood to all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot of books start to be set in the 90s. And one, it's great because we've have enough time that's passed where it is sort of a nostalgic time frame, which is crazy. But also, I think to get around this sort of, technology component of books and like how much easier it makes things in life, but how much harder it makes for a plot. Technology makes plots very difficult at times where it's like, why can't they just pick up their phone and, call someone, right? So it's interesting to see how much stuff is now getting set in the 90s. And I wonder if part of that is to be a workaround to some of the technology components. It's interesting.
I think it's like a combination of nostalgia and the workaround.
Yeah, I definitely think so too.
So what are some of your other favorite late 90s, early 2000s rom-coms?
Oh gosh. I love 50 First Dates, which that's maybe a newer one. I like both. So their other movie Blended is a great one too. They just have such great chemistry. Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. But I love those. Oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank? I've literally seen them all. I mean, name one and I've seen it and I probably like it. But yeah, those ones were kind of the first ones to come to mind. I'm going to get off this and think, why did I not say 7 others? But
I know, like right now in my head, I'm like, yeah, wait, what are other ones?
Yeah, what are they? What are the good ones that I'm not thinking? Oh, obviously Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks movies were great. Anything with Meg Ryan was, amazing too. Like You Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle are 2 good ones too.
Yes, You've Got Mail has definitely been like a formative part of my my life. Which I think I need to find out, like I need to have my nieces like watch it and just see how confused they are about like AOL and I was thinking of like, I don't know, like Never Been Kissed, or you in your book actually you mentioned a little bit of like Runaway Bride.
Yeah, anything Julia Roberts. Never Been Kissed is a great one. That's one of my favorites for sure.
Yep. Drawing a blank on other ones. I don't know, like 13 Going on 30.
That's another great one.
Yes, but yeah, Serendipity like has there's just something magical about that movie. I don't know if it's the New
Well,
York
it's actually
magic.
really hard to write a romance where they're not together, for the majority of the time, right? But still have that connection. I think that's what that movie did really brilliantly. It's like you're still rooting for them. You still want them to get together, but they're not actually spending much time together on the screen. So, yeah, and that's that part was definitely consistent with Love Buzz too. But I watched a lot of shows too, like One Tree Hill I'm a huge One Tree Hill fan.
You got that in your book too.
Yeah, I can't help it. There's a One Tree Hill reference, I think, in every book. But yeah, that was a big one, like Dawson's Creek. I watched all those shows too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, when there was the One Tree Hill reference, I was like, yes, the pot brownie episode. I know it well.
Specific episodes, yeah. I'm so glad that someone like actually knew what that was and like could picture it. That makes me so happy. Yes. I feel like Jenny finally was on board once we said Dawson's Creek. Did I read that correctly?
One Tree Hill, yeah.
Oh, One Tree Hill.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One of our members said Notting Hill, which I also is.
Oh yes, good one. Yes, one of the best lines, right?
Yeah, I think the other day we chatted with the author Jason June, and actually like yesterday or the day before, he posted on Instagram like his face photoshopped over Julia Roberts' face in that movie, saying, "I'm just a girl asking you to buy my book." Like, yes, exactly.
That's a very good one. Yes, I should have thought of that.
That's technically 1999, but I did say late 90s. So
yeah, so many good ones. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore.
No, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know why rom-coms have like struggled so much recently.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I mean, a lot of what we see now on Netflix, it's like the like murder mystery or like the action rom-com. So I kind of hope that trend is over soon and it kind of goes back to more of the sweet kind of silly rom-com, if you will, but we'll see what happens.
So on the other side, there's a few heavy topics laced into the pages of Love Buzz. Was it difficult to explore those topics while also including the fun and flirty moments?
Yeah, I like that I like to have a mix, right? And I don't think that a book is ever one thing or should be one thing or has to be one thing. I think more and more in contemporary romance, we're seeing that you can have deeper elements and components that are beyond just the love story, right? And we want to see the richness of the characters and kind of what's going on in their other lives. I think Beach Read by Emily Henry is a great example of that. It's a rom-com that deals with cults, and some darker elements as well, and death and grief as well. So, and that, obviously resonated significantly with people. So I think that window has definitely opened a lot more in terms of being able to have a book that is more than just about the love story. And so it is nice to be able to maybe have a heavier moment and then have it coupled with a joke or a lighter moment. And that's potentially surprising. And to me, anytime I'm surprised in a story, that's typically a good thing. So I like the opportunity to be able to do a little bit of both for sure.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's good to be real. Not everyone's lives are just happy and fun all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you go about like balancing that part with the romance part with also then Serena's like self-discovery of what she wants her life to be like?
Yeah, well, I'm a pantser. I didn't know what the story would look like. I started with the meet cute and kind of went from there and didn't really know. I mean, I kind of knew what the ending would be, but didn't really know. And I wrote myself a bit into a corner where, okay, by chapter 3, they're separated. Now what? And so then the book sort of took on a life of its own and really became more about Serena. I didn't necessarily anticipate that it was going to be mostly about her and her own journey. I think when I sat down to start drafting it, it was really more going to be a true romance and a true rom-com. So it's kind of, the work kind of takes you where it wants to go and you sort of follow it. But yeah, I definitely made it difficult for myself in terms of, okay, they're separated. Now what's going to happen? And how quickly will they come back together? But the story really became more about her. And so I followed it. And I think I was glad that I didn't sort of try to force it back into, well, if it's going to be a rom-com, it's got to, fit these parameters type of thinking. I was naive enough to not even know to think about those things, as a debut author who really sort of hadn't gone through the process yet. So I'm grateful for that. It just sort of turned into the story it was supposed to be rather than trying to fit it into a box that was going to be more marketable. And luckily, I had an agent and a publisher who supported that and weren't super concerned about, oh gosh, well, this sort of sits between shelves. How are we going to market it? What are we going to do with it? They were willing to kind of take that risk and go on that ride with me.
Yeah. Like, since you are a pantser, did a lot of the side characters just like show up as you were writing, or did you have any of those in mind? Like, I'm thinking about like Odette, who I loved, by the way.
Yeah, people like Odette. No, they kind of came up as we went. I like Clarence, the best friend, for example, and even Odette. Like, I tend to surround myself with sarcastic, feisty people, and so those are inevitably the types of characters I think that show up as side characters, and who are sort of going to support you, but also going to hold you accountable and razz you if you do something kind of not cool. So, and then with Odette in particular, we don't see a lot of elderly representation in romance and rom-com. And we as a society tend to discard people of a certain age and women of a certain age in particular. And, I just love the idea of, I think it's cathartic to write a character like that who really doesn't give a damn and will say what she, thinks and, isn't afraid of repercussions and sort of plays into that a little bit of I know what's expected of me and I'm going to purposefully break some of those rules just to see what happens. That was really fun to write.
Everyone needs a good Southern grandmother.
Exactly.
I want my own Southern grandmother.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, so had you always planned on New Orleans to be like the place for the meet cute, or were there any other cities that you were thinking about for the secondary location of the novel?
It was always New Orleans, always Mardi Gras. I don't know exactly how I came up with that, but I knew I wanted something that was sort of not romantic on its head and, very much felt like what happens when you meet perhaps the right person or potentially the right person at the wrong time or kind of an inopportune situation. And that is a theme of the book, but it's also kind of represented in that initial meet cute too. So I wanted it to feel not romantic, but somehow there was a romance component even in a very unromantic setting.
Yeah, the first line between them is "Show me your tits."
Yeah. It's Mardi Gras.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How you get beads.
How you get beads.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like it's such like especially for it to be a place of both of them visiting and having that reason for them to be there totally makes sense. It is one of the top bachelorette party destinations.
Yes.
Yep. We love adult coming of age stories because they remind us that it is never too late to question your current path or to take the leap and try something new. Why do you think it's so difficult for femme folks to want to start new once they hit a certain age?
Oh, I love that question. I mean, well, I'm, in my 40s and just released my debut novel. So I'm certainly an example of that myself. I think, I don't think it's intentional, right? We sort of, you make a decision and then you make another decision, and then soon you kind of look around and wonder, how did I get here? And sometimes it's in a good way. Sometimes it's, maybe in a jarring way. And
Mhm.
we don't think that some of these decisions that we're making are impactful for the rest of our lives, or that we don't stop to look up every once in a while and kind of wonder what's happening, and are we where we want to be? And I think that's totally normal, right? You go through the day-to-day of life, and I love the idea of, you can blow it up if you want to, and you can start over. And is it scary, and is it potentially disastrous? Sure, but it's still an option. And I think for Serena in the story, it was very much she made mistakes, it was very uncertain and very unclear, but ultimately, even if it was messy, it was hers. And it was the first time that something felt like hers. And I think, we hear that a lot in people's lives of, when people either leave a career and start something new, or leave a long-term relationship, that even if it's messy and it doesn't turn out the way that I wanted, at least I'm doing it authentically and for myself. And, and that's enough to make it worth it, even if it doesn't work out exactly as planned. So I think anytime someone is brave enough to make
Mhm.
those types of decisions, I want to root, you want to root for that type of that person and that type of decision. I think it's great to see. And I think we see a lot of, like we see the lists of 25 under 25, or, those types of things. And, there was a meme that was going around a while ago that was like, well, I want to see the over 50 list of like who did things for the first time, once they reached a certain age. I mean, that's the list that I want to see, in terms of people who, because I'm past what, like, well, shit, my time's over then if I had to accomplish all of this by the time I was 25, right? So I think there's a more of a need for an exploration of those kinds of things, where people shifted their lives rather than just, I was successful from the beginning.
Definitely. I read a book a couple years ago by Kathy Lee Gifford, and it was
Yes.
it was just about how like she keeps starting over.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was kind of reminded me of that when I was reading this book. And,
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things with society of like, where do we get the expectations of like where you should be by a certain age, or like what you should be doing by that age? And yet we somehow all have those expectations. Like, not like my mom was like, yeah, you better be married by 25 or whatever. Like, it's just in the air. I don't know.
Yeah. I remember graduating from college. So what are you, 24 at that? Well, no, 22, like 22.
Yeah. Yeah.
And buying a book that was called What Should I Do with My Life? And just sort of like, someone tell me what to do, and just feel like very like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Do I just take the first job that comes along? Is this going to now, determine my entire future? So yeah, that uncertainty was something I felt deeply in my 20s, all through my 20s, really.
mm-hmm. And making the decision at 18 what you're going to major in college, and then like when you've not experienced any of the world.
No. Yeah. And it's the reason that most people don't use their degrees in the capacity in which they were gained, right? I have a psychology degree, which has come in handy from time to time, but ultimately, I didn't go to grad school. I didn't become a psychologist like I thought I was, it's completely different path. Like I feel like that's most everyone's story.
Mm-hmm. My degree is in theater. So,
okay.
I work for an accounting firm now.
So literally the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of, another favorite part of Love Buzz for me was Serena going to the store called Flattery. And can you tell us a little bit about that store and kind of your inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so this is a fun one. So I'm an entrepreneur kind of in my real world, my real job. And the Flattery was a real business that a girlfriend of mine, Amelia, and I had thought about starting, and we bought the URL. I think I still own it. I should check on that. before someone else scoops it up. And, we had built a mock page. We had started looking at affiliates. I mean, we had gone pretty far down a path. We ended up not moving forward with it for various reasons. She works in fashion, so it was a good fit. But we did end up not really moving forward with it. But the entire business model, as outlined in the book, was the true kind of business model that we had put together. So it was fun to give it new life in this capacity.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about it for those of us those people who haven't read it yet?
Yeah, so the Flattery is a boutique that Serena stumbles across in the course of the book, and it is a boutique it's a women's boutique, clothing boutique, where the clothing is separated by the area that you want to feature or flatter. So clothes that either hide a chest or accentuate a chest, depending on which you feel fits your body type. And there are certain categories. So tummy, butt, legs, right? Whatever area you want to either feature because it's a good asset that you feel really confident in, you want to show off, or an area that you would want to maybe lessen through clothing, or take attention elsewhere too. So it's all the racks are separated by those specific body parts or areas rather.
I loved it and I would shop there, and I think you should still go forward with that idea.
I mean, nothing's off the table. And it really
tie it back to this book.
Any good business idea, I mean, it came from a need, right? Like I would go online and Google dresses for a big booty, and then you get links to articles that talk about the types of dresses you should wear or the types of things you should wear. It's like, okay, great, but where's the link to the actual dress that I should wear? I still have to then go find these types of dresses, right? So we wanted to take the guesswork out of it.
I would totally shop there.
I mean, I'm getting inspired after some of these conversations, I will say.
I mean, yeah, and then I loved seeing Serena's journey into the e-commerce world. I currently work in e-commerce, so okay. I was like, oh yeah, I've written product descriptions. And like,
it's funny. Yeah, one of my girlfriends who works in e-commerce was like, she said she was reading it and she was like, oh gosh, please tell me you did not write this thinking like that she could just do this easily and have it all kind of work out. And she's like, then I got to the part, and then she's like, okay, good, because I was going to be mad at you if you made it look like it was this simple, because it's definitely not this simple.
I did appreciate her, like, why can't I think of words? Just her attitude of going out there and just learning about marketing on her own and doing all that stuff, and yeah.
And we tend to think things are easier than they are.
Yes. So which of the characters did you find the most rewarding to write, and who was the most challenging?
Well, Serena and Odette, I think, were the most rewarding. We talked about Odette and kind of why it was very cathartic to write a character like her. And Serena also because I think, in any main character, there's a bit of yourself, and in an aspirational way almost, and especially in a rom-com, right? Maybe not in like a thriller, but in a rom-com for sure. And so, it is like, again, what would happen if you blew up your life and kind of got to do these things? And so you get to live through this character and say, okay, if I turned my life on its head and kind of went in a completely different direction, it's kind of fun to think about sometimes, even if you're happy in your life, what would that look like? So that was really fun. Challenging, I'd say, I don't know if anyone was particularly challenging. Maybe Julian, the love interest, only because we didn't get a ton of him in the book. So really getting to know him and know who he is and, what makes him unique and special, there just wasn't as much of him on the page.
Yeah, when all of a sudden it was chapter 30 something and it was Julian's point of view, I was like, like, I'm ready for this. Was that just kind of, I know you said you were a pantser, but like just where you felt like the part of the story it was time to come in as his part, or was that pretty
That came
intentional?
in during edits with my editor, and we sort of were having the conversation of we need to get him kind of on the page more throughout, even if it's not physically him, like just to, like, so with their, you know, there's a daydream, there's a dream, there's a, you know, there's a couple of points where he's there even if he's not physically there. So, you know, trying to at certain intervals ensure that he was part of the story still. And so this was one of the, and I was like, well, this, I was like, just hear me out. You know, what if we do this? And so, yeah, and she had, my editor supported it, liked it. And so we included it. But, you know, I think it's part of the entrepreneurial spirit that I have is like, you know, I want to do something that's maybe a little, even if it's small, but just not expected or not standard. And, you know, those are fun things to find in a book. So.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun. Yes.
Good. I'm glad it worked.
So we love covers. The cover for Love Buzz is sleek and the black pot with the black and pops of color. Can you share with us any stories that went into the design?
Yeah, I loved it. I was very, very happy with it. The designer at Harper was amazing. Her name is Jo. And I knew I didn't want a cartoony rom-com cover.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are the types of books I read. I love them. But I didn't want to give sort of the wrong impression of this book and kind of lean too far into that rom-com space because it is women's fiction. So we wanted it to represent kind of the in-between space. And the dark cover, I didn't think about it at the time, but I love it even more now, seeing it on shelves and whatnot, because it really does stand out next to a lot of lighter covers. You know, there's a lot of pinks and yellows and oranges in this space. So I really like the contrast of it. My one contribution to the cover was the font is the Nirvana logo font because there's a Nirvana theme in the book. So I was like, oh, it'd be cool. I don't know if we are allowed to do this legally, but would be really cool if we could use the font, and they were able to do it. So that was my one contribution to the cover. And because Love Buzz is, of course, it's a Nirvana song title too. And then there's a theme in the book. So it was fun to be able to incorporate that. And then I get to say I contributed one thing to the cover.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about that. Was Love Buzz always the title that you had envisioned, or?
No. So the original title when I was querying the book was called One Night on Bourbon Street. And then my agent, we changed it with my agent before we went out on submission. So we went through a couple of options, and I'm happy we changed it for sure. And we're going through that again for book 2 right now of trying to, they don't like my titles very much. We're working through kind of what's the title change going to be for my second book too right now.
Yes, as someone who likes Nirvana but is not super familiar with all of their work, as soon as you got to in the book that Love Buzz is a Nirvana song, I was like, oh, okay, now this is connecting. So what do you hope that readers take away from Love Buzz?
Well, first of all, I hope they find it fun, right? And kind of that it is a handful of hours that are just fun and entertaining. And that was really, again, kind of what I set out to do. I wanted an escapist read that just felt good. And heading into summer, you know, that's a lot of the types of books that I think people seek out during this time. So hopefully it fits into something poolside that people would really enjoy. And I hope that it is a bit inspiring if there's a goal or a dream or things that people have thought about doing but haven't done and, you know, want to do, that there are, you don't have to blow everything up, but, you know, perhaps there are ways to incorporate that into your life and that it's never kind of too late to change what feels unchangeable.
I love that.
I definitely took that away, even though I've changed my life like at least 3 times at this point in my almost 36 years, but yeah, I think another change is coming soon. So
okay, Jenny's gonna go back into theater.
Only it would pay.
Yeah,
that's tough.
Great point.
You know, the money part is always.
You could maybe like do some combo of accounting and theater. Like, I don't know. That could be like
There you go.
Yeah.
something. Something's there.
I mean, creatives need help with books. That's a real
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah. Yes, we do.
That's a very strong niche to be in, I would say.
Yep. So we know you're working on your second book, and we know kind of the premise of the third. Can you tell us any more about the second? Like,
Yeah, so it's coming out in March, also from Harper Perennial. So we're deep in edits now. I just got I got the first 100 pages back from my editor, so that's what I'm going to be working on here in the near future. But it leans more kind of into that true rom-com space, whereas this one was sort of on the fence. And it is about Sloane, who is a video game designer, apocalyptic video game designer, and doomsday planner, who goes on a fake dating, so it's a fake dating trope, trip to Turks and Caicos with her neighbor to help him win back his ex, and chaos ensues. So it's not our typical heroine. She is she was a really fun one to write. She's a gamer. She's going after her dream job and is trying to land her dream job with a top video game design company. The guy she's with is a complete opposite. So it's got a lot of fun kind of traditional tropes in it too, from the romance perspective. Fake dating is one of my favorites. So it was fun to write.
yeah.
That's mine too. Do you have any other favorite tropes?
I like enemies to lovers. I think that's a fun one. The Hating Game by Sally Thorne is a great example of that trope done really well. One Bed is always a fun one.
Oh,
yeah. There's, romance is just so fun because it's constant reinvention of these same tropes, but people manage to do it, and it's always feels new and fresh. And that's one of the fun things about romance, is that it's, you can read about the same types of things, but it's always in a fresh kind of fun new way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like a good enemies to lovers, like a good fake dating.
So another favorite question to ask all of our authors is, can readers get signed copies of Love Buzz anywhere?
Ooh, yes. So there are signed copies through Changing Hands Bookstore in Phoenix, and they will be shipping from there. So yeah.
I will get a link once our chat uploads for everyone.
Our local indie that I did one of my launch events at. They're phenomenal.
Awesome. And do you have any advice for aspiring authors looking to publish their debut?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of writing podcasts and whatnot as well, and so I've heard a lot of the advice that people give, and it sounds very sort of trite and cliche until you're in it, and then you're like, oh no, that really is the good advice that people need to hear and take to heart. And one of those things is to keep going. And I don't even mean that sort of in a rah way. I think, anything, there's a saying in marketing where, you have to be willing to go further down a path than anyone's willing to go. And that's where companies find success, because, so many people will drop off and fail before you get to this point, and then you're the last one standing. And I think authorship is really, in a lot of ways, that same philosophy. There are so many people who want to write a book or have an idea for a book or talk about writing a book. And then you narrow that down to the people who actually sit down and start writing. And then you narrow that down to the people who actually finish a book, right? And so on and so on and so on. And who actually get an agent, who actually, sign with a publisher, who actually get their book out. And the number goes down significantly. And a lot of it is because if you don't have success on that first go around, people give up. They think that it's not for them, or they're not meant to do it. When in reality, you hear so many authors, the majority of authors, talk about how much failure they've had in their careers, especially early on, how many rejections they've had. And it's easy to look at the end of someone's process, and you weren't there for everything that came, for it. So the keep going, again, is not really even a rah thing. It's a, a sheer numbers, if you're an analytical person, right? It's a sheer numbers game. And if you look at it that way and can be more pragmatic about it, I think there's a lot to glean from thinking about it in terms of a numbers game versus am I good enough?
That is definitely interesting. Yeah, we hear so much different advice every chat. And
yeah. Tell me what is something good you guys have heard? What's one that's resonated a lot?
I mean, one, and you brought it up when we were chatting before the chat, is having kind of a writing group of authors or other aspiring authors to kind of run stuff by and kind of connect on either the pain points of the publishing process or get advice. That's been a big one that's resonated with me.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
Yeah. How did you find some of your writing buddies?
Yeah. I mean, when I started drafting this book, I had no one. I mean, again, my husband knew, my agent, once I signed, my agent knew, but really, I mean, there were months before that. Right. So I really didn't have a group of people. I have two writing groups. One was through a group on Facebook called Moms Who Write, and they were doing a roundup of connection. And so we're all spread across the US, but we have a Slack group that we post questions and talk to. And they're often the people I go to celebrate things first, because, you know, people don't necessarily get what a big deal it is to get a starred review or, you know, so-and-so liked my post or whatever it is, right? Only people kind of in this world really understand the magnitude of some of these things. So it's great to have them from that support perspective as well. We beta read for each other. And then my other group was through a podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, which is a podcast I love. And they were doing a connection where you could sign up and talk about your genre and whatnot. And then they connected you with a writing group. So yeah, I have two, and we've been together, both of those, for over a year.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah, both of those are not ways I have heard about other authors connecting. So that's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then once you're, I don't know if this exists in the self-publishing world. I'm sure it does. But once you have a traditional publishing deal, there is every year a Slack group that is for debut authors, which has been tremendously helpful as well. So sort of anyone who is traditionally publishing in that year, and kind of all in the same group. And I've learned a lot through that group also.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, Neely, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely will need to have you back when your next book comes out, because I have a lot of questions already about it.
Good. Yes, it'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you, members of the Nest, for being here. Our next author chat is going to happen on Sunday, June 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And it's going to be with Nancy Crochet, who is the author of Graceland. All right. Have a good night, everyone.